How does Matthew begin?
Genealogy.
With a genealogy, right?
Yes.
If we go through his genealogy and read through it, it starts with whom?
Father Abraham.
Abraham. Abraham's the father of Isaac, who's the father of Jacob, who's the father of Judah, who's the father of Perez, who's the father of Hezron, who's the father of Ram, who's father of Amminadab, father of Nahshon, father of Solomon, father of Boaz, father of Obed, father of Jesse, father of David. Right? How many generations? 14. From Abraham to David. How many from David to captivity? 14, right. Solomon, Rehoboam, Abijah, Asa, Jehoshaphat, Joram, Uzziah, Jotham, Ahaz, Hezekiah, Manasseh, Ammon, Josiah, and Jeconiah. All right. How many from deportation to the Christ?
14.
Yeah, so Shealtiel, Zerubbabel, Abihud, Eliakim, Azor, Zadok, Achim, Eliud, Eleazar, Mattan, Jacob, Joseph, and of course, Jesus. How many do we have?
41.
Yeah, where is the 14th?
Yeah, right. That's what the confusion is.
Yeah, we only get 13.
Yeah.
And actually, someone read 1 Chronicles 3:10 to 14.
First,
Which verse? What's there?
3, verses 10 to 14. Yeah, and for those who aren't reading,
10 to 14.
10 to 14. Look up here and we'll track it. So Solomon, Rehoboam,
Abijah, his son. Asa, his son. Jehoshaphat, his son. Joram, his son. Ahaziah, his son. Joash, his son. Amaziah, his son. Azariah, his son. Jotham, his son. Ahaz, his son. Hezekiah, his son. Manasseh, his son.
That's good. That's good. Great. What did you notice? Yeah, we kind of got stuck here for about 3 names. Now, Uzziah has a slightly different name in 1 Chronicles, but there's still like 3 names that we hit on here that are not listed. So how many generations are there from David to deportation? A few more than 14. But it sounds so good. 14, 14, 14. Right?
And Matthew didn't want to break the system.
Yeah. How do we... Yeah. All right, well, let's go. What's one of the major themes of Matthew that you looked at for your weekly task? Repeated phrase.
Jesus says the promised Messiah.
Yeah.
Okay, but what's the phrase that he often uses?
As it was written.
This was done in order...
That they could fulfill.
Yeah, in order to fulfill. Right? So the first one of these, passage we're all familiar with. Now all this took place to fulfill what was spoken by the Lord through the prophet. Behold, the virgin shall be with child and shall bear a son. They shall call his name Emmanuel, which translated means God with us. Right? Now that is from Isaiah 7:14. Therefore the Lord himself will give you a sign. Behold, the virgin will be with child and bear a son, and she will call his name Emmanuel. Okay, so you looked at this for your weekly task. Is this a good fulfillment citation? Okay, well, let's look at the passage. Then the Lord spoke again to Ahaz. And what's the situation? You've got Aram or Syria and Ephraim or Israel who have teamed up, and they've decided they've got Judah in their sights, and they want to take over and install Tabeel as king. And so Ahaz is a little worried. So Isaiah comes up to him, says, hey, don't worry, I got this. And then he says, ask a sign for yourself or from the Lord your God, make it deep as Sheol or high as heaven. But Ahaz said, I will not ask, nor will I test the Lord. Then he said, listen now, O house of David, is it too slight a thing for you to try the patience of men, that you will try the patience of my God as well? Therefore the Lord himself will give you a sign. Behold, a virgin will be with child and bear a son, and she will call his name Emmanuel. He will eat curds and honey at the time he knows enough to refuse evil and choose good. For before the boy, curds and honey, by the way, milk and honey, it's promised land language. For before the boy will know enough to refuse evil and choose good, the land whose two kings you dread will be forsaken. Okay? So, this is a sign given to whom? To Ahaz.
King of Jerusalem and Judah.
And when, what is the time frame for fulfillment?
Well, apparently it wasn't right then. The time is going to be, I don't know if you're asking if they're saying it in there, but it is the prophecy of the Messiah.
Is it?
Apparently not, because of eating curds and honey sound like John the Baptist. Or Elijah.
Oh, I did this on Sunday.
And I got all confused because I realized when he got to talk about eating curds and honey, it sounded like John the Baptist or...
Yeah, I don't know that it's John the Baptist allusions, but when is the time frame for when is this sign going to be fulfilled? Yeah, which is what kind of time frame? Before he's old enough to know the difference between good and evil.
Which is 13, basically. 12.
Okay. The land whose two kings you dread will be forsaken.
Yes. That would be a,
So are we looking to some distant Messiah figure?
yes.
Apparently not, but it can be.
Well, they're saying that it's not going to be fulfilled right then.
Before this boy who's born is old enough to choose between good and evil, those two kings that you are afraid of are going to be gone.
Right, and the Assyrians came and destroyed.
You do what?
King Ahaz, whatever, he didn't believe that. I mean, he's like, I need a sign. Give me something to work with here. In other words.
Well, how do you know he didn't believe it?
Because I know he didn't believe it because if God had set a prophet to put him at ease,
Is that why God sent him?
that's what the research is.
Well, to me, when I did this assignment and I read that, and I recognized that basically the Assyrians came in and destroyed everybody.
Yes.
They took over. They came in and literally took over the land. And so I saw that as being that as this happening by way of the Assyrians coming in and completely wiping out Samaria and all the places that these two kings thought that they could rule, and ultimately came on in and took care of Judah as well. Almost, and then it seemed like that God was in some ways angry and giving wrath to Jerusalem because they didn't believe what God had said that he would take care of them. And so that's kind of what I answered my assignment, because that's kind of where I went with that as I was reading.
Okay, yeah, you're right. The way this ends up happening is Assyria comes in and wipes them out, and then comes down and wipes out much of Judah too.
Right.
And yeah, I would challenge the idea it's because they didn't believe.
Yeah.
And we'll talk more about this probably next time. But what the point to see here, this sign of the woman giving birth and Emmanuel being born, and this has to happen before Israel and Aram are wiped out by Assyria.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
Which means it's not referring to some Messiah figure that's going to be born hundreds of years from now. It had to be fulfilled in Ahaz's day.
It had to be, yeah.
It is not a prophecy still looking for fulfillment in Jesus' day.
So why did he go into Isaiah and grab that scripture?
Well, and here's the other thing. If it's being fulfilled in Ahaz's day, is this the right translation of the word?
Because it said young woman, it's not
Yes.
girl.
And the reason that is, hold on, wait.
Go ahead, John.
What's the dude's name? Septuagint.
The Septuagint?
Yeah, him. He was an ancient translator.
The translation. The Septuagint is the Greek translation.
The Hebrew to the Greek Bible.
Yeah. Yeah.
But he was undertaken by the Jews because the Jews didn't understand Hebrew.
So, well, the Septuagint is the Greek translation. Septuagint means 70, and there's a legend that there were 70 translators.
The Jews
Yeah.
later credited that. They didn't believe it was the word virgin.
So the word that is used in the Greek translation of Isaiah can mean virgin.
Right, okay.
All right, Parthenos. In Hebrew, this doesn't really mean virgin.
No.
It means young woman. Yeah, Alma. Very good. And unless you want to argue there were two virgin births, it doesn't mean virgin in the context, because the sign was not that a virgin was going to give birth in Ahaz's day. Right? It's that a young woman would give birth. They would call the kid Emmanuel, and before he was old enough to know the difference between good and evil, those two kings that you're worried about are going to be taken out.
But isn't that disputed today because of so many translations in the Bible?
Well, but the point is, in the context, it can't be talking about a virgin giving birth. Again, unless you want to argue that there were two virgin births, which most people don't. Because this has to be fulfilled in Ahaz's day. Right? Because it's saying that this kid is going to be born to this woman before, and he's, before he hits 12 or whatever the age is, those two kings are going to be taken care of and you're not going to have to worry about it anymore. Right? Now the other question is, how in the world does that function as a sign? Because what is the purpose of getting a sign? Yeah. So I'm so certain this is going to happen. Ask me to do anything, and I'll do it, so that you can have confidence going forward. I'm going to do it. Well, when are you going to know that this is true? Once it's happened. Well, once it's happened, you don't need the confidence to press forward because it's already happened. Right? You're not going to know this was a true sign until those two are wiped out before this guy is old enough.
So what was the time frame from the time that he said that Mary was pregnant and how much she gave?
Well, you're talking about hundreds of years to Mary. To Mary, yeah. Yeah. Isaiah is hundreds of years before that. So, what in the world?
Actually, before you get answer that, you get to really delve into.
Yes, and that's the point. You can't just go back. Oh, yeah. So why do your Old Testament translators use the word virgin here? Because they know what Matthew's going to do with this.
Yes.
And so they read Matthew back into Isaiah and put that in Isaiah.
So would that not be the Q source going into it?
Don't worry about Q right now. No, the translation was made. English translators know what Matthew's going to do with that, and so they try to make it line up so that when people go back and look at this verse, oh yeah, they quoted it correctly. Right? But in context, this is not at all talking about a virgin who's going to give birth to the Messiah hundreds of years from now.
Yeah, and you can see that pretty quickly when you read it, but it's like, okay, well.
Yeah, and every Christmas we trot this out and say, the Jewish prophets prophesied about Mary the Virgin giving birth, and those hard-hearted Jewish people that don't even believe their own scriptures. No, they know their scriptures better than we do.
Yeah,
And they know that's not at all what this is talking about.
So what is it?
Well, we'll talk about that at length. Right? Yeah, Give me a couple minutes to just get through this introduction, and then we'll come back. All right. What about the second one? He remained there until the death of Herod. This was to fulfill what had been spoken by the Lord through the prophet, out of Egypt I called my son. From Hosea. Is this a good prophecy fulfillment?
Yes.
I said yes to that.
Yes.
Okay, well, what is this talking about in Hosea?
Because what he's saying in Hosea is the Jews clearly understood the meaning of Israel not being a human, but the land itself. The context of the message speaks of God's love for the nation of Israel.
Yes. So when it talks about out of Egypt I called my son, who's the son?
No, it's Israel.
It's Israel. This isn't a prophecy at all. It's a historical recital of what God did in the Exodus.
Right, 11 more.
Right?
It's the word, it's the word.
Yeah, it's the people. So I brought my people Israel out of Egypt is essentially what he's reminding them of what he's done is the basis for what he's going to go on to say.
Isn't it son, Israel, and love? They all get the same meaning as.
Well, there are three different words, but here the son is Israel.
Right.
Israel's the son that he called out of Egypt, but again, it's not a prophecy of what he's going to do. It's a historical recital of what he's already done in bringing them out through the Exodus. So again, this is not a prophecy looking for fulfillment in Jesus' day.
Right. And that's kind of obvious.
Yeah.
Now that we're discussing it, it makes sense what the assignment was. But this,
I got this assignment.
I did the assignment.
Yeah.
I did the assignment.
Yeah.
I'm just getting more understanding.
I had to research, really.
I can tell you know the words and everything. That's impressive. That's impressive. What about this one? Then what had been spoken through Jeremiah the prophet was fulfilled. A voice was heard in Ramah, weeping in great mourning, Rachel weeping for her children, and she refused to be comforted because they were no more. This is in reference to the murder of the innocents when Herod orders all boys under 2 to be killed in Bethlehem. If you go back to Jeremiah, though, this is Jeremiah 31:15. This isn't about a bunch of babies being killed. It's about the Babylonian deportation and how they were taken out. So again, it's not a prophecy that was looking for fulfillment. 2:23. Came and lived in a city called Nazareth. This was to fulfill what was spoken through the prophets. He shall be called a Nazarite. What is a Nazarite?
One who doesn't shave his head.
Yeah, one who's set apart for God. They translate it Nazarene here because he says it's someone who comes from Nazareth. But the word here is actually Nazarite, which isn't someone who comes from Nazareth. It's someone who's set apart. And it's not clear exactly where Scripture even says this. So that's a little odd. Quick second. Okay, well, that one's not so good. Leaving Nazareth, he came and settled at Capernaum, which is by the sea, in the region of Zebulun and Naphtali. This was to fulfill what was spoken through Isaiah the prophet. The land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali, by the way of the sea, beyond the Jordan, Galilee of the Gentiles, the people who were sitting in darkness saw a great light, and upon those who were sitting in the land and shadow of death, upon them a light dawned. About Isaiah in depth. When evening came, they brought to him many who were demon-possessed, and he cast out the spirits with a word and healed all who were ill. This was to fulfill what was spoken through Isaiah the prophet. He himself took our infirmities and carried away our diseases. Now, when Isaiah talks about he bore our infirmities, what does he mean? This is the suffering servant passage, Isaiah 53. It means he became like one of us. Right? He took on the same weaknesses that we had, became subject to the same sin. It doesn't mean he picked them up and carried them over here and dropped them off. Which is how Matthew seems to be applying it here. Right? He took our infirmities and carried away our diseases.
I think it's a bad translation.
Well, yeah, exactly. But Jesus, aware of this, withdrew from there. Many followed him, and he healed them all and warned them not to tell who he was. This was to fulfill what was spoken through Isaiah the prophet. Behold, my servant whom I have chosen, my beloved in whom my soul is well pleased. I will put my spirit upon him, and he shall proclaim justice to the Gentiles. He will not quarrel nor cry out, nor will anyone hear his voice in the streets. A battered reed he will not break off, and a smoldering wick he will not put out until he leads justice to victory, and in his name the Gentiles will hope. Right? This is a prophecy of a coming figure. Is the fulfillment of this somebody coming along, healing people, and saying, shh, don't tell? Probably not what you would first expect. Right? I mean, this is talking about Gentiles and justice, and he doesn't cry out in the streets, but he's telling everybody else not to cry out in the streets, and he's healing Jews, and so it's not clear how this is the prophetic announcement of this. Does that make sense? Yeah. This one is the only one that Jesus himself says. In their case, the prophecy of Isaiah is being fulfilled, which says, "You will keep on hearing, but will not understand. You will keep on seeing, but will not perceive. For the heart of this people has become dull. With their ears they scarcely hear, and they have closed their eyes. Otherwise they would see with their eyes, hear with their ears, and understand with their heart, and return, and I would heal them." The issue here, Matthew's quoting the Septuagint, which says, "For the heart of this people has become dull." If you read the Hebrew, it says, "Make the heart of this people dull." Isaiah is actually being commissioned to make their hearts dull. Septuagint has a very different reading. So what do we do with that? Again, we'll talk about this a lot more next time. All these things Jesus spoke to the crowds in parables, and he did not speak to them without a parable. This was to fulfill what was spoken through the prophet. "I will open my mouth in parables. I will utter things hidden since the foundation of the world." Well, if you go back and read Psalm 78:2, you'll see parables doesn't mean nice little nature stories that have a spiritual truth enclosed in earthly garb or whatever you want to. It's basically saying, I'm going to tell you Israel's history so that you can learn the lessons that we still haven't learned. God has been faithful and we have not. Okay, this is a good one. "This took place to fulfill what was spoken through the prophet. Say to the daughter of Zion, behold, your king is coming to you, gentle and mounted on a donkey, even on a colt, the foal of a beast of burden." How many animals does Jesus ride into Jerusalem on? In Mark and Luke and John. How many in Matthew? On 2. Why? Because it says mounted on a donkey and on a colt. So in Matthew, he rides in mounted on a donkey and on a colt. On 2 animals. He rode on them. Which is not what the Hebrew means here. I mean, it means even, not and, but you know, it's the same. It's the vav. It's the same word. So that's a little awkward. What about this one? "Then that which was spoken through Jeremiah the prophet was fulfilled. And they took the 30 pieces of silver, the price of the one whose price had been set by the sons of Israel, and they gave them for the potter's field as the Lord directed me." What's the issue here? Well, he says through Jeremiah the prophet. Where is it from? Zechariah. Oops. Missed again. So, what are the odds? I mean, Matthew seems to know Jewish culture pretty well. Most scholars identify this as the most Jewish of the Gospels. What are the odds that someone who seems to know Jewish culture pretty well would miss on every single one of his major theme prophetic fulfillments in unique ways almost every time? I think it is on purpose. The question is, what in the world is he doing? Right?
Trying to win over the Jewish.
Is this going to win people over if you take Scripture out of context like this? No, it makes them just dismiss you. Right? So we'll talk about this next time. I will say, though, that the key seems to be in Isaiah 6:1 to 9:7. The first fulfillment, the first fulfillment citation is from there that describes Jesus' birth. The 5th one is from Isaiah 9 and describes the beginning of his ministry. And the 8th one is from Isaiah 6, and that's where Jesus takes on Isaiah's commission. It's the only one spoken by Jesus himself. And you also get an inclusio. The first one is, he shall be called what? Which means God with us. How does the gospel end? And lo, I am with you. Right? So we have kind of an inclusio around the gospel of God being with us. Okay? So next time we'll talk about Isaiah 6 and how that plays out there, how Isaiah's commission is fulfilled there, and then look at how Matthew takes that over and portrays Jesus in that light. All right?